Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. We're kind of getting up and running, getting started, and it's just nice to see everyone. I wasn't able to make the last meeting because Palmer was here, but I am here today and I'm thankful to be here. So it's a beautiful day. We've got a few things on the agenda just to go over quickly. And then we'll keep going with our speaker. We've got pizzas that are going to be coming. They're kind of rolling between cities right now. So when they show up, we'll figure out how we want to approach that. But my name is Ron Solheim, Director of R3, the R3 Collaborative, and just a couple of housekeeping things. If you need restrooms, they're just on the other side of the lobby here. There's a couple of restrooms there. And feel free to step in, step out as needed. We've got some water, we've got some sodas in the cooler. And we've got some, like I said, some pizzas on the way.
And the Wi-Fi, if you need it, is the phone number is the password.
So right up here on this side, the phone number is the password for the local Wi-Fi. So with that, I'm gonna call on Dwight Anderson, since I haven't seen him for a while, to maybe we'll do an opening prayer for us to get us started.
Okay, all right, let's pray. Our Lord and Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this beautiful day. We can serve you. Thank you for each and every one here around the tables and those watching online that are serving the this population of people that have been incarcerated, or coming out of incarceration, or they're in recovery or coming out of recovery. And I thank you for the partnership. We can work together as the body of Christ. And I pray for continued wisdom and understanding of how we can serve you better and see lives transformed by the power of the gospel. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Anderson. Yeah. We do have a lot of folks here today, some new faces as well. So I think before we get going with our featured internationally renowned speaker, Marlin Meszaros, we'll go around and just do introductions and what organization you're with. That would be helpful for Marlin as well, and for everyone else. So we'll start with this guy right here.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jonathan Wolf. I'm with
I'm Norm Anderson with Prison Mission Association with White and 12 seats.
Next to him is,
Yeah, I'm Pastor Dwight Anderson. I'm the director of Prison Mission Association. And we're the new publisher of Norm's book. So I've got the books here if you want any copies. If you guys got them. And what we do at PMA, we provide free Bible correspondence courses, both in English and Spanish, all across the country. We're in all 50 states and 28 countries overseas. And that the inmates or whoever, you don't have to be in prison, but you can get college credit for doing our Bible correspondence courses. And our goal is to develop leaders in the prison and plant house churches or micro churches right within the prison. So rather than parachuting in and just meeting 1 hour a week or something, we're developing the leadership in that ministry right within prisons. And I'm happy to be on the board of R3, and this has really helped our ministry take off, being part of R3.
you, Dwight, and another Anderson over here.
Steve Peterson, I get the privilege to serve with Green Homes and
I'm Mary Madison with Marlin Homes.
John Henderson with Rain Homes and R3.
Mary Cardinal Peterson, and with these guys, as well as the Minnesota Corrections Established.
Bill Betzler, Rain Homes. Joel Williams with New Court Industry.
Ruth Miller, I'm with the Salvation Army. We have reentry houses. I'm also a long-term chaplain at Hennepin County Jail, the men and the women. I know the men are always asking for material that they can read after we have our class. In fact, we'll have our class tonight. And I was just looking at 12 seeds, so oh, here we go. Okay. So, long time in this field, excited to be here. And, you know, that's it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jesse Kaplan. I'm the Regional Outreach Manager for Minnesota Adult Teen Challenge. I also provide peer recovery support services and training through Minnesota Prevention Recovery Alliance, and I'm on the Minnesota Certification Board of Directors.
My name is Gretchen Miller. I'm a part of Consumer Ministries and Raising Sisters.
Janine Hale, Consume Ministries and Raising Sisters, and we partner with Prison Fellowship and Shaka.
I am also Steve Peterson, so the second one is zero. I work with People Incorporated, manage a program called Corrections Integrated Support, providing reentry services for individuals who are being released from local jails here in the Twin Cities.
Great. Well, it's great to see everybody today. We've got a few more on the list that may show up as we're going. And then we have a couple people online, or we have one online, Sarah Ryman. I don't know if you can
Hi
hear me.
guys. Yeah, can you hear me? Good to see you. I wish I could be there in person, but not today. I work with the other Steve Peterson, with Corrections Integrated Support with People Incorporated, and I'm a Justice Ambassador with Prison Fellowship.
Great to have you here too. Thank you very much. Just a couple of quick announcements. Minnesota Corrections Association has their fall conference coming up. It's in October up in Duluth. I know people can still register. It's not the early bird registration, but if there are people who are interested, you can go to the Minnesota Corrections Association website. It's their 90th anniversary year. So they'll be having a lot of a very full agenda with a lot of really good speakers and a lot of good workshops that'll be going on there, as well as the 90th year celebration for the Minnesota Corrections Association, which started back in 1933. It's the oldest, one of the oldest, if not the oldest, corrections association in the United States that's been in existence since it began. So if folks are interested, shoot us an email, whatever, we can get you connected to the website as well. And I do know one individual who did sign up, who was planning to attend, and he mentioned that he's not able to attend now, but he did get in on the early bird registration, so might be able to make a deal if somebody's interested in buying him out of his registration. I told him I'd mention that as well here. So that we have going. A couple of things that have come up recently that, were passed through the legislative session, this last session, that are starting to get a lot of traction. And people may be aware, and maybe Mary Cardinal Peterson can jump in a little bit, because she's on the legislative committee with MCA. The MRR program that is being slowly coming together or being formed. And Mary, do you want to say a little bit about that and what MCA is hoping to provide input with? I'm putting you on the spot, I know.
Yeah, it's like, okay, it's the Minnesota Rehabilitation and
Reinvestment.
Investment. And they're looking at doing some restructuring, of making it possible for people to have early releases from prison or supervision, dependent on an individual goal plan that people are creating on their goals and their needs to accomplish those goals. It's there's a lot of work that still needs to go into how to implement it, and there is a team of people working with the Commissioner of Corrections to do that. So as far as the MCA's involvement is, we are really wanting to ensure that all voices are heard in the development plan. So to make it fair and equitable to all the people involved in the process. But I think the implementation date, the full implementation is like 2025.
Yeah, it's going to be some time from what we gathered in information. And I think it's important to note, as far as I can tell, and Marlin's probably more of an expert being in Second Chance Act and everything else. But it looks like, the maximum amount of time basically 50%. So in other words, right now, if you go to prison, it's, you serve 2/3 of your sentence incarcerated and 1/3 on supervision in the community. The MRRA looks like it would be if people follow their plan and, depending upon how the policy is developed with Department of Corrections, it would allow for people to reduce that incarceration time down to 50%. I'm not quite sure how it will impact the community supervision time. I haven't really looked at that very closely, but it will at least have the potential to impact that incarceration time by 50% as opposed to the 2/3. So that's kind of in the works now, and as Mary mentioned, MCA is hoping to have some input on that as well, because the agents and others that are on the Minnesota Corrections Association are hoping to provide some input into how that looks and how that might impact community organizations. Really is something that I think we do have the committee at MCA as well, the Community Resource Committee, basically, or the Community Supports Committee, would be, things that people do that are positive, productive, pro-social, that get looked at as part of reducing that incarceration time. And so, what can people do when they're released from prison to continue on that path of, rehabilitation and reentry into the community? And then there was another little piece of legislation that also got passed that I really wasn't aware of, and it's the prosecutor resentencing initiative. That's an unusual one. It's actually started out on the West Coast in California, because of the large prison populations and all of the disparities in sentencing there as well as here. But what that is it allows a prosecutor, county attorney, to look at sentences for individuals who were sentenced out of their county, and to look at, is there some reason, was there something that was happening at the time that resulted in a sentence that is maybe unjust, unfair, too harsh for the individual. And if in fact they feel that way, it allows the prosecutor and county attorney to bring to go through a review and bring it back to the courts for potential resentencing. So it literally could result in somebody getting a brand new sentence, or a resentencing, I should say, which would result in, and it can only result in reducing the penalty, not increasing penalty, as part of the legislation as well, or part of the law. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because it'll be up to all 87 prosecutors in Minnesota to determine how and if they will enact that, or use that, I should say, not enacted, it's been enacted. So whether or not they intend to use it, and how they'll use it, and how they'll apply criteria to persons that have been sentenced under their offices. So that's going to be also a year out from any implementation. Ramsey County, John Troy, the prosecutor there, was pretty instrumental in getting that moved forward in the legislature. And so he does have a committee put together, an advisory board that is working on looking at how that may get applied in cases. And it's kind of interesting because it allows for the individual who's impacted, as well as the agent who's assigned, the corrections agent or the commissioner of corrections, to actually submit an application or request to submit an application. And then it's up to the prosecutor. They can deny it, and they don't even have to respond to it if they don't want to, but it'll be a little interesting to see how it starts to get implemented. I think Ramsey County will be one of the ones that's kind of out in front on this, I know, because I've met with them on it, and it'll be interesting to see how that gets moved forward. So those were just two things. If there's anything else, or people have questions, shoot us an email. We'll try to get you connected with people who can give you the right answers and more information on those, so. Without further ado, we're gonna introduce Marlin Meszaros here, who is now the director at Damascus Way. Marlin's, I can't give you all of his history. Some of it's top secret. We can't share everything, but Marlin has been with, he's got lived experience. He's been through some programs at Department of Corrections. He's been through MNTC, was very instrumental in his journey, as well as he was at Freedom Works, working at Freedom Works for a significant period of time here. And he's been involved with the Second Chance Act for many years, and now has taken over the leadership role at Damascus Way. And we're just pleased to have Marlin here to provide us with information about what's going on at Damascus Way with their new facility and all things looking forward. So without any further ado, and I'll let you fill in the blanks.
Yeah, so I'm sharing some of my testimony too.
Yep, that's absolutely what we're looking for.
All right,
We want to know who you are.
okay,
And why?
and why? So, Stan, is that better?
Yeah, and the camera's back here, so I don't know.
How does it?
It's kind of a tough one.
Yeah.
You got eyes in the back of your head?
Okay, you're being recorded one way or another.
Yeah, either way.
One other thing that just, you're talking about legislative stuff, I just came from a GR housing support provider meeting. And another piece of legislation that got passed for people returning from incarceration is an automatic qualification for housing support GRH funding that'll be kicking in November of 2024. So it's, I believe that MRRA is being a little bit strategic in that too, to have that support in place for people that are gonna be released or beginning to release to have stuff in place. So, yeah, that's exciting too. The more support, the better. Anyway, I'm Marlin Meszaros. I just celebrated 9 years in recovery.
Correct.
I tried meth once for about 25 years. That enabled me to earn several degrees, mostly second degrees, fifth degrees, first degrees. Lived in some of the most secure gated communities across the state for over 10 years of my life. For me, my earliest memories of being a young boy, I associated, and I remember it now too, like almost like it was probably one of my first cognitive connections in my brain. People are having fun, they have alcohol in their hand. It immediately was one of the first things in my life that I connected the dots on, is, you know, and I just couldn't wait to get to be a big boy and drink beer, drink alcohol, because that's what grown-ups did, and that's what you had to do to have fun. And so I got drunk for the first time when I was 6 years old, like really drunk. I drank 6 beers and passed out. My mom was extremely upset because I was with my older cousins and whatever. And but yeah, that was the first time I woke up next to a toilet with vomit and all this stuff. And I'd love to say that I never drank again, but literally me being 9 years sober is the longest I've ever been sober my entire 50 years of life, because I didn't wait another 6 years or 9 years to do that again. So by the time I was 11 years old, I was smoking pot almost every day. And that's just how my life went for a long time. But I first met Jesus when I was about 13 years old. My 2 best friends were twin brothers. Their mom was an alcoholic bartender, and she met Jesus, and it radically changed her life. And this is in the probably 84, 85, somewhere in there. And she got really connected to a Assemblies of God church that was, man, they were on fire for the Lord. Long story short, if I was going to spend time with my best friends, we were going to be doing some church stuff, right? My personal life, my parents were getting divorced. I was already experimenting with smoking weed and all that stuff. But I was at a stage where I said, is God really real? Is this just another you know, Santa Claus, Easter Bunny, whatever is just really real. And, me and my buddies were reading in Malachi 3:14, where the only place where God gives us permission to test them is in giving, right? And so for whatever that meant to my 13-year-old brain or 12 or whatever I was, the next day or later that day, we went to the youth group at church and I had $5 in my pocket and I threw it in the collection plate. By the end of the week, by Saturday morning, 3 different spots, I found a $20 bill, another $20 bill, and a $10 bill. So that $5 was returned to me tenfold within a couple of days in random spots, just walking down the street. And that was God making himself real to me, because I literally had the conversation in my head, okay, if you say I can test you in this, here's the test. And I threw it in the bucket, and that's how he showed me he was real. So for a lot of years, I lived a life of doing wrong things and immediately asking for forgiveness, because I knew I was living wrong. I believe that God had created me for a long, I didn't get to know him. I knew he was real, but I didn't get to know him or who he created me to be for a long, long time. And so for there was many years that I truly believe that he created me to be an example of what people shouldn't be. That's really how I felt about myself and what I thought about him and all of that. And of course, there's periods of time in there where I just like, that money on the sidewalk was a coincidence and it's all just nothing and whatever anyway, you know. But there was always that constant tension in my life of living on one side of, you know, life and still having this experience that would always come back to me as being a real experience, even when after I would doubt it. By the time I was 21 years old, had been married, I was getting divorced. I was renting a room from my uncle. He was about the last person that would actually drink with me, because my alcoholism had elevated to a point where people just didn't want me around. I was, you know, not a fun drunk at all, and starting fights and doing all this stuff. And so my uncle, my days consisted of getting up in the morning, drinking 5 or 6 beers, whatever was left over from the night before, going to work as an auto mechanic. So if you were getting your car worked on in Inver Grove Heights in the early 90s, I apologize now. We had test drove it drunk. But by lunchtime, I was starting to shake, and I worked next door to a bar. Lunch was a few beers and a half a hamburger and a couple of French fries, and then back to work on cars. And at the end of the day, it was leave work, go right to the liquor store, buy alcohol, and go drink until I passed out, and that was my cycle of life. My uncle would drink with me, and he would tell me that he was going to commit suicide, and that I was going to have to be the one to find him. And I just never even registered to me that could possibly be true. I was always raised to believe that if people talked about suicide, they didn't really mean it. They weren't serious about it. That was the message I heard from my dad and other people back then. Well, lo and behold, on a very warm May 1st day, and I think it was 1994, I believe, or 95. I'd been at my mom's house. My dad called me, said, "Hey, your grandma, called me. Uncle Mike's not answering his phone and whatever. Can we go over to the house and see what's going on?" Long story short, I could hear much better then, and I could hear inside the garage with both the service door and the roll-up door locked. I could hear Johnny Cash playing on the radio in there that was set up on a car stereo connected to a 12-volt battery that had started to run low on voltage, and there was a cassette tape playing. So it was Johnny Cash singing A Boy Named Sue, and it was like drug out, and because the battery was going dead. And I just knew right at that moment that, like, when I got inside that garage, I knew it had an idea of what I was going to find. And so I took apart the handle on the garage door, rolled up the garage door, and there's my uncle hanging from the rafters. In a moment, all of these things that he spoke to me that I never believed was going to be true, it was me finding him. He said I was going to have to be the one to do it because I was the only one in the family strong enough. My dad was off to the side in the yard with my grandmother, kind of keeping her over there. We called the authorities. The authorities made me do an inventory of the garage because we worked on cars there and there was tools and stuff. While he was still hanging from the rafters, I had to go through the garage and make sure nothing was missing and all of that, even though there was a note on the bench and everything else. I had already started to experiment. I had done other drugs, acid, cocaine, all kinds of stuff, you know, in my teenage years and all of that. But I had already started to do a little bit of meth, but I quickly realized that like methamphetamine alleviated my alcoholism, and what I would learn later was probably PTSD or whatever from that experience. So when I had nightmares about, I would do meth long enough when I finally slept. I didn't dream, I just slept, you know what I mean? And so I truly believe that that drug was like a gift from this God that, you know, that I said I believed in, but I didn't really know much about. I believed it was from him for a while, but quickly felony charges start coming out of that, that blessing, and trips in and out of county jail. I'd already had 4 DUIs by that time, and, but trips in and out of the Dakota County Jail. There's a great pastor down there, Pastor Jim Bazoski, if I'm pronouncing it right, that I would begin to attend Bible studies, mostly because they were co-ed, but and they give you this cool Bible in there that said free on the inside. So that's where my faith journey really began to grow, was inside correctional systems, because I would slow down from the pace of life long enough to actually open the book and read a little bit and sit and listen and question and do all the stuff. But so I probably served 2 years altogether at Dakota County Jail of in and outs, and you know, a few months here and a few months there, until they finally got sick of me and said, well, it's time to, we're gonna hand you over to the Commissioner of Corrections for a certain period of time, right? And that first time that I went into prison was in 1998. It was a 13-month sentence for felony fleeing a motor vehicle. And I went in there with an attitude of, I beat the system, because I threw some drugs out of the car that they never found, and you know, just kind of criminal bravado or whatever about that situation, because what should have been an 86-month sentence, I only got 13 months for, right? So it's not like beating the case, but from a criminal thinking or whatever, it was a little bit, I cheated the system some, right? While I was in there though, I finally slowed down long enough to do a trauma group, a grief group, I should say, with the chaplain, Marshall, was that her name?
Marshall.
Yeah, Marshall. She was running a grief group. And this was several years later from when my uncle's suicide. And I had no idea how pissed off I was for all of them years. Just the mix of emotions and everything else that went along with that, with what had happened. And I left there. I also participated in my first rec retreat while I was in the resident encountering Christ. And that was probably the single most powerful healing experience I've ever experienced in my entire life. Oh, and by the way, it's inside of a correctional facility again, you know. I left there. There's a piece in there where you write all your stuff down and you got to hand it over. And I remember just being in tears during that part of that event of like, who am I going to be if I release this stuff of who I've been for that my whole entire identity had been built around, right? Who am I going to be? And I let it go. And then the next day they come back and they show you that they burnt all this stuff, right? And it was like so much relief that I experienced of just weight gone, and like realizing like, oh, maybe God didn't create me to be this horrible person. I just made some bad decisions and was surrounded by influences that that weren't great for most of my life. And I would love to say that when I was released, I just have been living a great life ever since then. That's not the case. I did get out and I did okay for a little bit, but then I decided to start going around some people to show them how good I was doing, to show them that change was possible, to show them that you know, I'm worth something, right? There was another thing with when I started experimenting with meth and realized that like if I had that stuff in my pocket, all of the people that had disregarded me and said, we don't want you around anymore, as they started doing meth, all of a sudden I was of value and they wanted me around. And so it fed that part of me that was like rejected and stuff. All of a sudden I add this other chemical to the equation, and I go from being dejected to like, welcome, come over, if you got that stuff, you know, we love you, you're great. That feeling in itself is addictive. It's addictive in itself, right? And so coming out of incarceration, I'm working my job and I'm doing the things legally, right? And I should be more proud of that, but at the same time, I'm not receiving that feeling of like, hey, everybody wants me, everybody wants my phone number. That wasn't happening. And so there was that lure back into that life again. I was out 4 months, got arrested on a 2nd-degree methamphetamine possession charge. And so released in March, on my way back into prison by November on with a 74-month sentence. I got accepted into boot camp. I was out within a year. There was still that allure of like wanting people to accept me and all of that. So before I was even on my phase 3 in boot camp, it goes a 6-month phase of being inside, you know, well, back then it was only Willow River. It was co-ed back then. And then 6 months of pretty intensive supervised release, and then 6 months of less intensive. Right about the same time I was stepping down to less intensive, I started selling meth again. I had that thing of just wanting to be somebody, and not realizing that like, you know, my kids that wanted me and all that stuff, like that's truly what was valuable. I didn't understand that then. It took me a while, but lo and behold, I didn't complete the challenge incarceration program without getting violated and having to go back into the system. Really, things I was doing wrong, what I got caught for was a dirty UA because I couldn't not get high too. And so I was returned to prison for 43 months, basically for a dirty UA. I got back, I was doing my intake at Lino again, and they do go through the questionnaires of like your, you know, psyche and all that stuff, like how you're doing emotionally. And I said, well, I'm a little bit depressed. I'm, you know, had a son that had just been born, and like, I'm coming back to do 43 months in prison for a dirty UA, essentially. And I'm a little bit depressed. And so right from intake, I went to an observation cell for about 3 days where I sat there in my underwear with bare minimal stuff. And I said in my head, if I'm incarcerated and I have any kind of psychological problem, absolutely nobody will know about it, because the outcome of that was like anything but healing or helpful, or, you know, as soon as the psych services could make their rounds to come talk to me to basically make sure that I wasn't suicidal. Oh, okay, you can get out now. And you know what I mean? So there's like this mental note of, oh, no, I'm good, you know? But during that incarceration is when I would eventually meet John. Prison Fellowship was starting their first academy. Back then it was IFI. They were starting their first class, and I was down in Faribault then, and they came and did interviews and said, hey, you want to come up to Lino and be a part of this new program that's kicking off? And I said, yeah, down there I was going to Catholic services, Buddhist services, just any kind of spiritual thing. If I wouldn't have got beat up, I probably would have stepped into a sweat lodge. I don't know, but just anything to like digging in, right? For whatever reason, I wanted to know more and develop spiritually. And then this opportunity comes up, and so they take a bunch of us, a couple bus loads, I think, up to Lino. We go into a unit there where they had just made half the unit move. The other half of the unit were longer term people that didn't necessarily want us there because half their buddies just got shipped out to other facilities and other places and all that. So
Appropriately called Bishop.
yeah, Bishop building. We were told a lot of things were going to happen, or they thought were going to happen, that really eventually didn't really come to fruition. Like, oh, this has the potential to be an early release program. Not in Minnesota. I think that was happening in some other states, but it was exciting at the same time to be a part of something new and to be surrounded with like-minded people. And so there was great people that I got to meet. One of them just passed away recently. Governor Al Quee, who came in, and him and Chuck Colson actually came in to the facility, you know, toured our group, walked through the chow line with us, and as luck would have it, like just happened to sit like right across the lunch table from me. So I got to have lunch with Chuck Colson and Al Quee, right? And it struck me at some point in my recovery journey about the quality of people that I essentially got to meet in my life because of the poor choices I made. Not because of good choices, but because of the consequences that I was suffering. But the people that the level of quality people that really care about us, it just amazed me at some point whenever that reality like sank in, you know. It wasn't in the moment right then, it was later on in life as, you know, through Teen Challenge and other places like that, people that I got to meet. It kind of shocks me that like that quality of people would really come in and spend time with someone like me, and us. And so, I didn't graduate that program. I went up to minimum. I was supposed to be a part of a kind of a pilot program that was gonna move out to minimum, and IFI was gonna have some support groups out there and stuff, and prison fellowship quickly learned that like Lana Lakes is one prison, but minimum and inside the fence almost operate like two separate entities, and there was a whole nother level of bureaucracy to go through to try to make anything happen out there, and it didn't happen for a long time. I don't know specifically what's going on out there now or whatever, but I was out there kind of alone for a long time. But I made the best of it. I was able to become part of a STS work crew that worked at a machine shop. I saved up almost $8,000 before I was released, and making a bunch of good choices, right? Got out, went to work release, was able to pay all my fines and do everything to get my license for that. Got a great job, construction labor, and life was good for a while. And until I got done with work release and just, you know, again, started going around the wrong people. One of the biggest lessons I've learned, and one of the biggest lessons that I try to pass on to the people that I serve is, you show me your friends, I'll show you your future. Who you spend your time around, you will become. You know, in recovery, they say you go to the barber shop long enough, you're gonna get a haircut or, you know, whatever it is, but it's just what it is, you know. As far as like recidivism and all that, I get to be a part of committees, advisory panels and whatever now. I always remind people that usually oftentimes the first step toward recidivism is the person that picks somebody up from a facility. If it's during the day, responsible people have jobs and things that they have to do. So a lot of times when somebody's getting picked up from a facility, it's the person that don't have a responsible life that's able to make it there and, you know, set them up to get going again and whatever else. I did that to my brother more than once. My older brother, like, thought I was doing him a favor by coming to a facility and picking him up and getting him high right away and doing all the stuff that I, you know, for whatever reason, I thought was good at the time. So I actually managed to stay out of prison 10 years. I did eventually get another charge and went to Teen Challenge the first time in 2007. While I was there, I, you know, began to work on things while I was in IFI. That's where I began to like read the Bible actually and find out, you know, that God created me to be something more than what I had been. And slowly this calling to help people, because really even in my addiction and all the negative stuff I was doing, I thought in my mind that I was helping people because I wasn't a horrible person that was going kicking in doors and breaking bones if you weren't paying me or any of that kind of stuff. No, I'd probably just give you some more and tell you like, yeah, catch up next time, you know what I mean? And like a good guy, so to speak. But wanting to help, like there's always been this desire in my heart to help people, even though I was helping them the wrong way for so many years. also a person like many people that go through recovery and multiple recoveries, like going to a program and you're 2 weeks into the program and you can see everything that's wrong with every aspect of the program that you're in, and if I was in charge, this is what I would change, and this, I'd change this, and things wouldn't happen like that. This isn't useful, and this would be way better, and you know, all that stuff. I say that to say, like, there's always been this part of me that is interested in how programs work and how programs can help people and all of that. I've learned over time why things are the way they are, and that how come my greatest ideas maybe wouldn't have been the best ones at the time and all of that. Like that's come with experience. But I got sober in 2007. I was going to church. I had my kids in church. I had all the boxes checked, recovery meetings, all that. 2008 rolls around, the economy crashes as right as I'm coming out of treatment and stuff. There's not a job to be found anywhere, especially somebody with a criminal record as long as mine. About a year into my sobriety, year and a half, the mother of my kids decided that after 6 years of recovery herself, that she relapsed, wasn't coming home. And I was a full-time dad basically for the first time in my life. And it was stressful. I don't know how, you know, I used to hear a lot in my life about how like welfare moms cheating the system and stuff. And I'll tell you right now, if you're a full-time parent trying to live on assistance, there isn't no system that you're cheating. Like you're struggling hard, and it's probably some of the hardest work you'd ever do in your life. My dad was diagnosed with an end-stage congestive heart failure, and he was in the end stages of it. It's just some other life stuff happened, and I had all the boxes checked, and God wasn't blessing me. And dang it, I deserved that blessing because I was doing all the stuff. And I got resentful towards God, and I turned my back on him. The church I was attending, would nicely with a smile on my face, I'm kind of wrestling with God right now, but I wouldn't open up with anything. And eventually I came to the decision that life was easier when I was high, and that being numb to everything was just easier, and walked away from everything that I had accomplished as far as like restoring relationships with my kids and rebuilding trust with my parents and loved ones and all that, threw it all away and just stepped back into that life. And where scriptures tell you about cracking that door back open and the way things will flood into your life and in an abundance, it's just so true. My prior life, like there was whatever significant quantities and whatever, but it was like times 10. I met all the right, wrong people almost immediately, developed connections and developed it was a relationship with the bondsman who I could just call. I didn't actually have to have money because the cops had taken all my money and all that, but he would still come get me out, right? Like, and then just the people and all the stuff and relationships with women and everything was there, and just such an abundance to feed my flesh. Even in that, so it was about a 4-year run. 2 years into it, I was just so miserable, even with all of that stuff feeding my flesh, that I hated myself. I hated the people that liked me. I got to that point where that's just what it was. I always knew that if I was gonna recover from any of that, I just had to get back into Teen Challenge. Like I just had to get back there, and as charges are like racking up and stuff, if I have any prayers, chants, and HG double hockey sticks of not going back to prison, I got to get back in Teen Challenge. And I called my really close friend Gina Evans one day and told her kind of what was going on, and Gina said, do you think God cares where you're at, if you're in prison or not, if that's the only place you'll hear him? And the truth that she spoke to me in that moment, like that everything that I was numb to immediately was gone. It just brought tears to my eyes, because I know it was the Spirit of God within her that was like speaking to the Spirit of God that I was trying to suffocate out of my own self, you know. But I couldn't in that moment. It was just true. And so I did eventually get back into Teen Challenge, and that was promised by my lawyer that I would get a downward departure to 48 months if I just signed for the deal. And I went for sentencing on January 12th of 2015, and the judge said 135 months. And you can always tell, which nobody in this room would need to know this, but if you're ever in a courtroom and you're standing there for sentencing, and you have your attorney next to you, and you see a jailer over here, and maybe another jailer coming in from the side room, and another one from the back, and another one from another direction, and you feel them like strategically moving in on you, it's probably gonna be a bad day in court. Yeah, because as soon as they said 135 months in prison, they immediately put my hands behind their back and put me in handcuffs right in the courtroom. My mom was in there. My mom let out a cry that, well, still to this day, it just shakes my soul, you know. She had to watch me once again get taken away in handcuffs and all that. And, again, so I get to St. Cloud E-House, and like, God, where are you at? I was just in treatment for 6 months, doing really good. Like, how come I'm here again? You know, and like, but he quickly began to show me that like there was a reason for it. Eventually, I would hear about this early release program, this CRP program. Like, what is that? And everybody calls it it's the 1/3 law. Like, I try to look it up. Like, there's no such thing. It says 1/3 law. Like, you know, but that's what everybody talks about. Eventually, I get to Lino back, class 45 of PFA, was IFI, now it's PFA. And write my case manager, hey, what do you know? By this time I've found the statute and I found the policy on it and stuff. Can you please apply me for this program? Mr. Meszaros, with your criminal record and your sentence, you'll never be approved for this program. It's, you know, nobody gets it. I've never seen any of this facility ever get it. And like, okay, I hear you. But please, will you apply me for this program? Because I want the person that actually makes the decision to let me know that. In my mind, I had already settled myself and had to serve my time, set over 7 years is what I would have had to have served. I really began to just really read the New Testament, and it dawned on me at some point in there that like, if anybody deserved like some sort of rich, happy life, it would have been the people that walked hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder with Jesus while he was on earth, and every one of them died horrible, miserable, persecuted deaths, right? And so who the heck was I to think that I deserved anything better than that, right? That paradigm shift in my mind really began to change just how I viewed life and struggles in life and all of that. And at one point it clicked in my head that if I had to spend every day the rest of my life inside of a cage, and it kept me in a relationship with Christ the way I was, and then I would stay in there and I would be content with it, not happy, but content with it. You know, walking across the prison yard one day with a lifer who says to me, if I've learned anything in these 28 years or whatever we've been in, then it's that my problems haven't been my problems, my solutions have been my problems. And for him, it was 16 or 17 years old. He solved a problem with a pistol and he took a life, right? For me, my whole life, problems come up and I solve it with a needle and a spoon and you know, as the song says, a trip to the moon. Anyway, that began to like click with me. Like, all I really have to do to be successful in life is find positive solutions to life's problems, because really the problems that I've experienced in my life, in and of themselves, would have never sent me to prison. It was always my solution that sent me to prison, and my solution that kept me disconnected from my children's lives and you know, disappointing my parents and doing all that stuff. Always had to do with the solution that I chose, that I started to choose at 6 years old, when I realized that chemicals immediately change how I feel. And so just knowing that life sucks sometimes and it's okay and it's just temporary. Because also at some point in that incarceration, I really understood what it meant to have eternity in my heart, to know that my eternal destination is the forever. This is temporary. If it feels good, it's temporary. If it feels bad, it's temporary. And so what? You know what I mean? And so them just really paradigm shifts in my way of thinking have really changed the trajectory of how life goes for me and how I deal with life on life's terms. My case manager would eventually, when I finally wrote her supervisor, I get a kite back from her. It was funny. I should have saved it just for the story's sake, but like I get this kite back from her and she's responding to the kite that I had sent to her supervisor, but like it's a brand new request. Mr. Meszaros, I began the process of applying you for the conditional release for nonviolent drug offenders and this, you know, and like she hadn't known about it before and whatever. And I'm like, okay, thank you, Lord. It's happening, right? So I'll just put that aside. I think maybe I had some advocacy outside of prison. I'm not really sure, but I honestly owe Ron just as a huge debt of gratitude because he was the deputy commissioner of corrections that actually signed off on my release to be released and to be a part of the conditional release program for nonviolent drug offenders. And I
It's
would
the
have.
best decision I ever made.
Listen, I'll tell you, that being accepted and having that blessing. So boot camp is generally the earliest you can get out, and that's usually at 48 months you get to go into the child generation program, and then 6 months later you can actually leave a facility. I walked out of prison 50 months early because of that. And when I got that acceptance letter back, it was my case manager again, that just a one-line sentence, wow, all caps, exclamation point, you were accepted. Congratulations, you know, and okay, I should have framed that too, because those were maybe the most encouraging words she'd ever shared with me. Pretty quickly I moved over to the triad unit at Lino and did treatment, and God just instilled this healthy burden on me to come out and be successful, to help give other people an opportunity, right? Because if I came out and was unsuccessful, like I've been so many times, the likelihood of somebody else getting the same opportunity is then less, right? Every time. And so it just was so imperative to me to come out, not make the same mistakes I had made, to use the tools that I've learned and developed in there, not to just leave them inside there. One of the things that dawned on me while I was during my last incarceration is that there's a lot of great programs inside those fences. Why the hell do you have to go inside those fences to receive those programs? Because a lot of them only exist in there. They're getting better now of that stuff. So I went right straight back to the front doors of Teen Challenge when I was released April 26th of 2018. Hoping to pick up where I left off when I got sentenced. I was 5 months in, and I said, no, it don't work like that. You know, I'm glad you made some positive choices while you're incarcerated, but you got to start over again. And so, by the grace of God, April 26th, 2019, I somehow walked the graduation stage of a 13-month program in 12 months. I'm not sure how that happened, but, and then I did a 6-month paid internship with Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge, applied for a position for the board of directors for the Minnesota Second Chance Coalition, was accepted into that. When my internship ended with Teen Challenge, went over to talk to George Lang at Freedom Works about a separate issue about my brother who was trying to get released from prison, and they said he couldn't go there, he had to go to Dakota, whatever. That's what the conversation was about. That was on a Friday. By the end of the day, he was throwing me the set of keys to an office over there, and went downstairs and fired someone else. And I had an apartment, and I was there at Freedom Works now for the last 3.5 years. So just over 90 days ago, an opportunity opened up at Damascus Way for Director of Reentry Services, and applied for it and interviewed for it. April 26th of this year was my second interview with them. And that's when I just kind of knew that it was a God ordained thing. Not that I'm like a superstitious numbers person or any of that, but like released from prison, graduate Teen Challenge, and second interview comes up on that day. Like, I don't know, It seemed like maybe significant, but, it's been great. The organization's growing. We are, who else familiar with Damascus Way? Yeah. So we serve men, have some committees put together right now about maybe, we're exploring the possibility of some potential women's housing in Scott County. My wife is actually on that committee with them, and so, working on it. But we also have a dad's program called Destiny Dads that's kind of getting off the ground and running. Currently, it's just in Scott County. We're building it out to try to offer it to other counties. My heart would be to like offer it to Dakota County, because that's where most of my history is. And we also have another program called Destiny Way. So it's for youth that are involved in the justice system to help divert them. We know that statistics say that an involved father is less likely to reoffend or to recidivate. We also know that kids that have involved fathers, healthy involved fathers, are less likely to continue on in their struggles with that life. And so it's exciting to us to be able to be a part of that, to help break some pipelines to prison, rebuild relationships with families and all of that. We also serve a population of people that a lot of other programs won't for insurance purposes and publicity and whatever else. But we serve level 3 sex offenders. We serve MSOP releases, so individuals that have been committed to the Department of Human Services, civilly committed after their prison sentences. They're beginning to finally come out of the facilities, and so we've said we will be the people to serve them. It's a belief that I've had that you know, without stepping on toes, but I might step on some toes. If you're not willing to serve everybody, are you really doing God's work? Are you really being like Jesus, right? If you have, I'll serve this segment and I'll be Jesus to them, but sorry, you can't come. I don't know. It never has rested well with my spirit. And so to be at a place that says, yeah, we're going to welcome you, and we're going to the best of our ability, exhibit Christ to you on a daily basis, and help you with practical services to come out and be successful and reestablish your life and be a productive member of society. It's just an honor and a privilege, and only by the grace of God, right? I'm a drug dealer and auto mechanic most of my life, but yet he still has me in a place now where I get to use all them years of damage that I did to not only myself, but to the community around me. I get to send out positive ripples of healing and hope and all of that, and hopefully change the trajectory of somebody's life somewhere along the way. So that's what I do. That's who I am. And thanks for listening.
I don't know if anybody has any questions for Marlin.
You said you work with the SOPs that are civilly committed. What do you do? How do you do
So
what you
the
do?
Minnesota Sex Offender Program, the individuals who've been civilly committed, basically, you know, when that happens, like the likelihood of them coming out, especially when all of that, here's the statistic in that. Prior to Drew Shodine and
Right.
Rodriguez,
Mhm.
there was about 12 people a year that got civilly committed like that. Right after that case happened, it went up to about 12 people a month. I don't believe that all of a sudden crimes got that much more horrific and all of that stuff. Obviously, it was just publicity, and it was a knee-jerk reaction. You know, there was a lot of stuff, obviously, but the political scene at the time, and get tough on crime and all that stuff. Well, now these individuals have the ability to petition the court for release. It's about an 18-month process they go through with the courts. it's a 3-judge panel that finally makes the decision to grant a release plan for them. And so, yeah, and they've done so much work, like, and I'll be honest with you, like, I have an individual there that's been in MSOP programming for 20-some years versus a Department of Corrections, somebody that's been in for 20-some years. The difference between the individuals is just like remarkable, because the environment for the MSOP program, the preparation for release and all of that, I know that there's probably a pretty high price tag that's tied to all that for reintegration and stuff, is just night and day different, right? You really wouldn't know. Usually you can tell somebody that's served some time in prison how they come out, their demeanor and all of that. The individuals that are being released through DHS, it's a different thing. It's a different thing. They've been treated like human beings. They've been treated like good neighbors for most of the time while they're in, and lo and behold, when they release, they come out as good neighbors. Department of Corrections isn't always that way. So, yeah, it's
So in Damascus Way, you're providing some housing at the facility for those that are coming out from civil commitments.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
one of the few facilities that is able to do that.
Yep, yeah, both Rochester, so we have a facility here in Golden Valley that I oversee, and then we have a Rochester facility. We have 2 houses in Scott County that are kind of a unique setup that we manage the houses, but they're actually, Scott County owns them, and so they've contracted with us to manage those houses. So as a part of their homelessness initiative from a few years ago. So
And just to remind everybody, level 3s are accepted at Damascus Way.
yeah.
Did you mention that already?
Yeah.
I have a question, and be patient with me because it's just rambling around in my head. So you don't have a program for women, but the men that are coming in, do you help them and guide them on like how to interview, how to get past the wall that says, well, forget it, we're not hiring you?
Yeah. So there was some of that stuff that was prior to me coming there, prior to COVID, that was happening probably better than it kind of went away a little bit during COVID and while we were building a new facility and all that stuff. It's something that's high on my agenda. One of the things that we did recently do is get our recovery community organization status approved, and so we will be providing peer support and we'll be help navigate some of that stuff. And so, but we have on our planning board some longer term objectives of some training programs, because again, a lot of the training programs out there won't accept the people that we're serving. And so we look at it and say, well, if they're not going to do it, somebody needs to. So maybe, we step into that realm and just be the provider of those services at some point. But
I for myself and Gretchen as well, we just to educate ourselves on how to help the women. We have a one woman in particular, and I'm not really sure how to guide her in this process. So if there's any kind of help that we could get to educate ourselves.
yeah. I mean, I can give you my card, whatever, too. Jesse probably has resources and stuff too. So, yeah.
Hey, Marlin. Thanks for sharing your story.
Oh,
I
yeah.
appreciate it. April 27th, I'm gonna send a message and see how the 26th.
Okay. All right.
Well, good to see you again. Hey, so you mentioned the housing, you got the 2 in Scott County down in Rochester for men.
Yeah.
And then do you have any housing, that's it then, none up here in Golden Valley area?
Well, Golden Valley, yeah, we have 30 beds in Golden.
I mean, after the housing you mentioned was like Rochester, Scott County owns them, you manage them.
Yeah.
But that's the next step forward after the, right? After they do their time at Rochester.
Not necessarily. So Rochester, we have some primary work release beds and ISR release beds. And then we also have HWSI apartments down there.
Yeah,
Housing and Services Independent. Yeah, I forget right off the top of my head the number of apartments that we have down there, and then there's also a self-pay option and all that.
Yeah.
So, we're actively looking right now for next step housing, because obviously, I have a guy that will come into my place, especially if he's, ISR level 3. And we have funding for him for 60 days, maybe get a 30-day extension on that. Then where's he go? You know what I mean? He's a level 3, and like, so we also have, you know, kind of on the drawing board, longer term goals of creating some next step housing that's welcoming of a background like that as well, you know, so. Because again, like, sometimes the next step is back into a household that was a part of the rest of it in the first place, so.
I was just wondering, because I know, you know, we get Damascus Way guys call for housing
Yeah,
stuff. I just didn't know if you were actually had your own, like one house or two here in this area.
yeah, not at, we're,
Not, well, but you got collaboratives.
Yeah.
There's always going to be.
yeah,
But, and then, I heard, because I got a friend of mine that actually just started working, our brother of ours, that just started working in Rochester. But he was mentioning, like, is there gonna be, they're kind of in the works, more Damascus Ways opening up in the state? Is that, did I get it right, or? Possibly.
it's possible, yeah.
Okay. And then,
It's on a need to know basis. And you don't need to know.
yeah.
There's no purchase agreement signed at this point or anything like that, but we're actively exploring options and being in prayer about it. And, most of you guys know Kevin Saunders. He just came on as our senior director, and so, we have a great organization structure in place right now, and I'm blessed to be able to be a part of it, and they have me, so.
So Damascus Way also hires old people too.
And then you mentioned also that, you know, it's in the works, the women's housing program in Scott County, which would be Rochester, right?
No, that's
I thought-
Rochester's Olmsted County.
Oh, that's Homestead, oh,
Yeah.
but anyhow, you're mentioning that that's in the works, maybe that housing.
Very beginning,
Yeah.
just kind of some planning committee stages or whatever, but,
So I can pray about.
yes,
And that-
Let's just say Scott County's felon friendly.
yeah.
Yeah, coming out of shop.
Yeah.
Yeah, real.
Yeah.
No, the guy that was very friendly just retired.
Oh.
The pastor that was on the.
Yeah. So,
Thank
My
you
wife-
for more women's housing, because they know it's much needed.
my wife has a passion for that. She worked at the Hope Healing House, was a graduate of the program, and then worked there for quite a few years, and so she understands the need. We understand the need, especially for moms with children. There just isn't hardly any services out there. What there's even less services for, though, dads with kids. So it's another avenue, you know, an area that there's even less services for them than it is for moms with kids. So, yes, sir.
This is a while ago, but I was a case manager in that, not called Housing First, but GRH housing.
Uh-huh.
And at that time, you know, the statute says it's supposed to be housing plus services. And where I was working, those services basically were checking on your person once a month. You know, very minimal.
Yeah.
And all the people that qualify for GRH housing have to have a disability. And I never thought that was enough.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, has that changed? Because if it hasn't, that puts your guys at risk, because what they need is support and relationship. And that's a heck of a lot more than once a month, here's your laundry soap and your bus filter.
Yeah, no, you're right, and obviously, that's what. For an organization that's just meeting their requirements of what has to be delivered, and, that's probably a different conversation. We would never be that organization. I would never be a part of an organization that was only doing bare minimum stuff.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, there is more than that that's needed and offered. You have to get to a certain point where you make it available, quit making it stuff necessarily mandatory, because you're, again, trying to move somebody towards independence. So here's the stuff that's available for you, and, you know,
Thank you, Marlon.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to do this before it's expired.
Yeah.
And Marlon's gonna hang around and eat pizza, so if you got more questions, feel free.
Quit praying for the pizza.
Oh, I always call him Pastor Anderson.
Okay.
I already prayed, why don't you pray?
Okay.
That'd be great.
Lord God, I just thank you so much. I thank you for the blessing of transformation, Lord. Not just healing, not just restoration, but transformation in my life and in my soul and in my heart. I thank you for the work that you do with each individual in this room. I thank you for the souls that are touched and blessed by the work that happens out of here. I pray for that to be continued and exponentially growing, Lord. I pray for the food itself, that you make it nourishing to our bodies, that you would eliminate the carbs and just let us enjoy the deliciousness. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.